Mama, mama, mama.
You
know
tweeted,
what today is, Mama?
You said
what today is?
What? It's President-elect Biden Day.
That's correct.
Yay!
Yeah.
Psychics are always off on timing. My future wife's 1,000 years late, so maybe she's wrong about the November 20th thing.
You know, you're talking to a pollster who uses actual science to predict things.
And as you were saying, Fernand, you were right about Florida. You're one of the pollsters. I had to talk, because I love you, first of all, but as a pollster, right, I just have to get your take on the whole "the polling was wrong again" thing. Tell us specifically about you and about Miami-Dade and your polling.
Well, first, I think we do have to acknowledge, because it's part of the industry that I work in, there were definitely some problems there. Fundamentally, I think the core takeaway, though, Stephanie, that we got to remember, the polls predicted that Biden was going to win the popular vote by a significant margin. I think when it's all said and done, you're going to see a 7 million or 8 million vote advantage for Biden.
Wow.
The polls also predicted that Biden was going to be elected president in the Electoral College, and you might see 300 plus electoral votes. So the core takeaways from the polling, I think, are sound. But yeah, there were some issues. Now in Miami, where we did our polling and released it really months before the election, we saw signs that there was going to be a little bit of a problem here in Florida. I am ashamed to say my fellow Floridians did not do the right thing. But it was evident that Biden had issues when it came to the state's Hispanic vote, and particularly my fellow Cubans that were going more for Trump this time than they did last time. And unfortunately, those results bore out, or else we would have been celebrating on election night and not tonight.
Fernand, is it this ridiculous Joe Biden's a socialist thing that worked with Cubans? It's because who's acting exactly like Fidel Castro right now would be Donald Trump. Right? If you don't like dictators and you voted for Trump, that's a disconnect for me.
Look, it is ridiculous and it is absurd that they would try and label Joe Biden and the Democratic Party, for that matter, as the party of communists and socialists and whatnot. But the only thing more absurd than that, Mama, is that the Democratic Party really didn't take that head on. They thought it was such a joke, the allegation, that they didn't even want to dignify it. But the problem is, with Cubans and Venezuelans and Nicaraguan voters, there's a lot of them down here. Yeah. If you don't answer the charge, then people start to think, well, maybe it's true. Maybe that's why they don't want to talk about it.
Right. Well, and you said this on Twitter, Fernand, you said Miami-Dade Cuban-American voters explain South Florida Cubans, who are amongst the biggest enrollees and beneficiaries of the Affordable Care Act per capita anywhere in the United States, voted en masse for the man whose stated goal was to destroy and eliminate the ACA. I get people saying the Latino vote is not a monolith, that Mexicans are different than Cubans and Puerto Ricans and etc. But that right there, a lot of it doesn't make sense to me. That Trump is the one, again, acting like Fidel Castro. He's the one taking their health care away. There are some things that's hard to extrapolate, even from polling, right? It's emotion, I guess.
Well, you just used the magic word, Mama, as you always do. Look, this is fundamentally what we've learned over the years. If voters voted just on the basis of reason and sound policy and good policy and voting their own economic interests, the Democratic Party would win every race over the last 50 years. The problem is we know that fear works, emotion works, and this weaponizing that the GOP does to get especially a traumatized population like Cubans thinking, oh my God, the boogeyman of socialism is back and they're Democrats. That does have an effect, as we saw in the results.
And Fernand, again, I am not a conspiracy theorist, but I know from our friend Joy Reid election night saying something's way off in Miami-Dade, knowing Florida as she does as well. I wanted to get your take on Stephanie Kennedy tweeted, the Postal Service failed to deliver 27% of mail-in ballots in South Florida. We saw the video of the ballots laying in the Miami-Dade post office. She said Trump did not win Florida. He rigged it. He sabotaged the election. Trump's a cheater, a liar, a serial criminal, but ultimately he will not succeed in stealing the presidency. To what degree is the postal stuff? That's a pretty big number to me, 27%. To what degree does this postal thing affect Miami-Dade, do you think?
Well, first and foremost, let's be crystal clear, Stephanie. You are not a conspiracy theorist, nor is anybody who says that there were deliberate efforts to sabotage the delivery of mail ballots by the Postal Service at the direction of this Trump regime. That is a fact. That is not a theory. That is a fact. To the extent that it had an impact on the actual election, I want to wait till we have a final certified results count, which should happen within the next 10 days or so. But it is also a fact that a lot of people that requested mail ballots here in South Florida and across the state did not trust, when they received those mail ballots, the ability to go and have them reach the Division of Elections in time. So what they did is they went to go early vote, or went to vote on election day, or held their ballot, or decided not to turn it in. Some people even mailed their ballots and then said, you know what, I'm a little concerned because I mailed my ballot, I don't want to even take the chance, and then went to go vote in person. And it's not that you get to vote twice. You tell them that you sent your ballot in the mail, they track it. If the Division of Elections has not received it, then they'll say, all right, you can vote now, and we will not count your mail-in ballot if and when we do receive it. So I think that might help explain that 27% discrepancy. But, before we go out on a limb there and say that absolutely happened, I want to hold my powder. But would I put it past what we've seen the actions of this bad faith regime? Hell no.
Well, I'm just curious. We talked to Glenn Kirshner yesterday, Fernand, about what's going to happen with this lawsuit against the post office and DeJoy and Judge Emmett Sullivan ordering him to deliver these ballots. That's what I wonder, is what is going to happen to those mail-in ballots? Will they be counted? Could it actually affect the count in Florida, particularly Miami-Dade?
Well, I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. Because unfortunately, this was not like a 2000 election scenario where maybe 10,000, 5,000 ballots could very well absolutely change the outcome. I mean, at least at first blush, Donald Trump almost won the state by 400,000 votes. He may end up winning by that margin, or even a little bit less when all the counting is finally done. So I'm not sure that's going to overcome. But look, here's the key point. President Biden and Vice President Harris are going to have to ensure, one of the first things that they do is implement, Stephanie, protocols to protect elections going forward.
Yes.
We cannot have this monkey business anymore, because even the suspicion that the ballots aren't being sent or counted is not good for our country. It's not good for our democracy.
Well, I saved another tweet for you from Did They Let You Vote? As a noted pollster, a 10-point lead is over 10 million in popular vote and a substantial electoral college victory. So election fraud is rampant. Ballots held hostage at the Postal Service. Don't fall for the polls don't work anymore crap. What is your reaction to that?
Look, I mean, again, this comes back to the questioning of the polls at the outset. It can't possibly be that all the polls are wrong. Now, are there bad pollsters and polls out there? Absolutely. Unfortunately, I mean, there are some that skew the result a little bit because they're not done in a proper way. But there are enough independent, reputable, methodological pollsters out there that have great scientific rigor. And if you're seeing all this deviation and it's consistent across the board, that is a sign of something may be up. And unfortunately, I've seen in other countries, Stephanie, around the world, where we know that the elections were manipulated after the fact, that contrasted with the independent polling. So I think it raises a flag. And that's why, again, I'm not going to say it happened, but we need President Biden and Vice President Harris to make sure in the administration, in the early days, they got to implement protocols so that this does never happen again.
Yeah. Fernand, did you say you thought at the end Biden might be up by 7 or 8 million votes when all the counting's done?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that is a 10-point lead, isn't it? Am I doing the math right? I mean, because the national poll had him up by 10 points going into election day.
It's close to it. We got to also see how many votes Trump ends up with. But listen, fundamentally, as the counting is done, what are the outstanding states where there's still the bulk of the states to cast ballots or to be counted? We're talking about California.
Yeah.
We're talking about New York State. These are obviously super blue areas that are only going to increase Joe Biden's margin going forward. And that's why I think when it's all said and done, fundamentally, the polls will have been right, just like they were in 2016.
Yeah.
The polls had Hillary Clinton winning between 2 and 4 and 5 points within the margin of error. That's exactly what happened with the popular vote.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, I loved your tweet. You said, I love my country, but I am haunted at the idea that millions of my fellow citizens knowingly voted to reelect this monster, and aghast that my home state of Florida again awarded this vile man our 29 electoral votes. I mean, look, I'm a happy clappy person, and I do think that, look, Joe Biden got more votes than anybody in history. There is a lot of good news in all of this, and it's a lot of people keep saying, from our friend Jen Rubin to Stuart Stevens to a lot of people, they're like, take the win, Democrats. Why can't you take the win? You flipped all these states. I mean, I think because of maybe Fernand the polling, our expectations were through the roof. We're like, they're going to take Texas and Florida, and I think that, but I will say the polling was very close in Florida and Ohio, so I don't think those weren't ones we really expected to take necessarily,
no,
right?
But if I could speak from a personal perspective, Mama, look, I'm going to take the win. We're all going to take the win, and we're going to celebrate the win when Biden takes his hand off the Bible and John Roberts shakes it and congratulates him as the president on January 20th. That's for sure going to happen. Yeah. But I think for so many of us who have seen our own personal lives impacted by people that we know and love and care for who went the Trump cult route, we wanted this national repudiation so that hopefully that would have acted for them as something that said, you know what, maybe you got this one wrong. Look at what all of us are now saying. And the fact that it didn't necessarily happen in those kinds of numbers, I think is why so many people feel a little bit chagrined and haunted by the fact that there's 60, 70 million Americans out there that didn't see when evil was on the ballot, that they shouldn't have sided with evil.
Yeah. Even Chris Lavoie, didn't you tweet? You said, I was going to be gracious, but you know what? I'm going to be insufferable about this win.
Yes, I will. I may have said that a little too early because, it hasn't been, completely counted yet.
I said it. I prayed to my daddy that we would have a Goldwater Miller landslide, but I was saying no sane person or pollster would expect that in 2020, right? They didn't have Fox News and right-wing radio back then. We are a country that is completely divided by even sets of quote-unquote facts, except that, look at Trumpers now shouting Fox News sucks because based on the numbers, they called Arizona for Biden, which is likely going to be called for Biden. But it's, Anyway.
Well, this is the problem with cultists, right? Facts are something that they're impervious to. But let me end with some of those facts because I'm a numbers and facts guy. Fact number one, Joe Biden will have gotten more votes for president than any candidate for president in the history of the United States.
Ever.
Fact number two, Joe Biden is going to have a clear majority of American voters, well over 50% of the electorate vote for him. That's only happened for a Democrat 4 or 5 times in the last 100 years. And Joe Biden is going to have one of the largest differences in votes between him and the Republican challenger that we've seen in a generation. So take the win, be happy, let's celebrate, but let's also focus on the work that needs to be done over these next 4 years and hopefully more.
And finally, we played Paula White speaking in tongues, which tells you where they're at in the Trump camp. You said we're really supposed to try and reconcile with these freaks, and that's definitely the Nazi salute at the end. So, you're right. We're going to have to coexist, I guess, with some people, but you're right. I think there's going to be no reconciliation with people that think, the Democrats eat babies, and I don't know what else, right?
Look, I'll let somebody else be, the more tolerant, peace and love person. I can't reconcile with people that think that separating kids from their families is an okay thing. No, that's not for me.
Well, Fernand, I will say quickly before we go, that was the thing, I guess, for me, that disappointed about the Latino vote. And again, we should stipulate Joe Biden overwhelmingly won the Latino vote, like 70%, about the same as Hillary did. So, again, they like to focus on these stories about, he didn't do well in this part of Miami. But I think it's just that the humanity, you're right, doesn't matter. I understand Latino vote, not a monolith, but you don't care that brown people's kids are being stolen and put in cages. You don't care that he called Mexican rapists if you happen to be Cuban, or if you so there is that part of me that is saddened.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. And look, I think that's why for so many of us, this was more than just an election. This was a character test as who we are as a nation, with the most clear-cut Rorschach test of black or white. And I don't mean that in racial terms. You had clearly evil on one side and decency and morality and good on the other. And the fact that so many of our fellow citizens chose evil when we had evil thrust in our faces, evil that separated and traumatized for life children from their families, it's a little disappointing.
Yeah. Well, let's focus on the happy clappy. And how unbelievably handsome you are. All right. I love you.
Love
oh my
you
God,
too,
look
Mama.
at that smile. Oh my God. Okay.